Hello and welcome to the Canyons Are Calling podcast. It's Cheryl. How are you? I know it's been a while. I just had to take some time off after my dog passed away and do some healing, and life got busy and months escaped me. So I apologize. I want to thank everybody who reached out when Raven passed away and gave me words of encouragement and support. It's honestly one of the hardest things I have ever dealt with in my entire life. She was a really important spirit and best friend for 12 years. And I know all you dog lovers out there will understand what I'm going through. Anyway, today I have a super exciting show for you. One of my favorite podcasts and one of my inspirations for starting the Canyons Are Calling podcast is Go Get Outside, Jason Milligan. I really love the way Jason interviews people. His style is just really casual. He talks to all sorts of people, and he's interviewed a lot of different canyonneers. And then when COVID happened, his podcast died, and I didn't have anything to listen to anymore. Well, I had like Backpacker Radio and other climbing podcasts, but I'm neither a backpacker or a climber. So I really missed Jason and Go Get Outside and the interviews that he was doing. So I decided to start the Canyons Are Calling. And then in November this year, in 2023, Jason started the Go Get Outside podcast again. And so I reached out. I was like, hey, I want to get you on the podcast. And so we decided that we would interview each other. And so this is a pretty exciting episode where I interview him. And then if you want to, you can listen to his interview with me on the Go Get Outside podcast. So I will have a link to that in the show notes. And then you can also listen to his interview with Tom and a whole bunch of other canyonneers on the Go Get Outside podcast page. We talk a lot about podcasting. We also talk about canyoneering. We talk about how he got into the outdoors. We go into a lot of that stuff and we just kind of ramble. So stick with it. It does get interesting. If you kind of get bored with the podcasting stuff, we do get back to canyons and outdoors stuff. So stick with it or just, fast forward a little bit or something. Anyway, enjoy the show. So today I'm here with Jason Milligan. How you doing, Jason?
Hey. Is this how you want me to talk on the show? I just talk like this, guys. Thanks for having me on your show. No. Hello, everyone. I am doing great. I've been driving around the U.S., sleeping in my car, and now I'm at Cheryl's house.
Nice. What do you think of Kanab so far?
Oh, I've been to Kanab before. I actually think Kanab's pretty cool because Kanab has a variety of interesting things around it that are different than other parts of Utah. And one of the other things I like about Kanab that people might not know is there is really good vegetarian food in Kanab. And I'm not even a vegetarian. I just appreciate all types of food.
Yes, because of Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, we have a lot of vegans and vegetarians here. So a lot of our restaurants have both, regular food and vegetarian, vegan food. But some of them are specifically, like we have a really great pizza place that's strictly vegan.
Is that's the Peekaboo?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there and Rockin' V, I've had good experiences at both of those places.
Yeah, Rockin' V is also
So hopefully they're going to sponsor your podcast now that we mentioned them.
I am good friends with Victor. Maybe we should get him on. He claims that Kanab is the middle of everywhere.
I mean, it's a good access point to a lot of other places. And it's a cool little place for such a tiny little town. Yeah, like it's got cool places inside of it. Like I haven't been here a whole lot of times, but I've had to pass through it a variety of times to go to other places. So it does work out for that. And then earlier today, you mentioned Best Friends. I was over there earlier and I also went to the Sand Caves, which is super cool and so accessible.
Right.
I highly recommend them. I posted a picture and now my mom's going to come to Kanab just to go to the Sand Caves.
You know the history of the Sand Caves?
It was some sort of mining thing. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So in like World War I, World War II, they would use that sand to make molds for cast iron products.
So they dug out all that sand to make cast iron molds?
Yeah. And then eventually it went into like playground sand and then it closed down. But
so the sand that I was urinating in as a child may have come from those caves. And
good possibility.
Well, that's good to know. I'm glad I've urinated in Cannabian sand as a small child.
Yeah.
Did they say Cannabian? Did they say Cannabites? Is that how they refer to people? Cannabians? What do they call people who live in Cannab? By the way, this is a canyoneering show.
I'm not really sure.
This is not the local Cannab podcast.
And we're here talking to Jason today because his podcast is one that inspired me to start mine. He has a podcast called Go Get Outside.
That's right. Yeah. It's called Go Get Outside, which was completely accidentally the name.
I love it because it's like either get outside or go get outside, but you should do both.
Well, so the way the name came about. So before I made it a podcast, it was a web series where the concept was, I want to help introduce other people to these activities, because for me, growing up in Louisiana, I didn't really have a concept that like canyoneering existed. I didn't really know that climbing was a thing that regular people could do. And a lot of other activities, I just didn't really know how to access them, or that even non-athletes could. And so I was like, I want to make this little web series where I tell people how they can start doing these activities. And I wasn't sure what I was going to call it. And so I just made a folder on my computer, and I was just going to call it Get Outside in the meantime. And for whatever reason, instead of writing out Get Outside, I just put G-O.
Okay.
So I would know what the folder was for. And then I realized, wait, hey, that's the word go. And then it became Go Get Outside. And honestly, I've never really been very happy with that name. I just never thought of a better one.
It's a pretty great name for a podcast.
People seem to like it.
Especially for the type of podcast that you have, because you interview so many people from so many different outdoor sports.
I mean, it's probably good for SEO, I guess, if I knew anything about SEO.
Right. Which is search engine optimization, for those of you that don't
That's
know.
right.
Because I'm figuring that out too.
Yeah, I'm taking, I don't even remember what website it is, but I'm doing some sort of free SEO thing. And by doing it, I mean when I get back home after this trip is over, I'm going to finish taking this video course online that's supposedly going to make me better at SEO, which is a thing I'm not good at.
You should send me that link, because I also need to get better at that.
I will gladly.
People can find me.
I will gladly send you that link.
Awesome. So let's back up a little bit and just tell us a little bit about like life in Louisiana, how you got into the outdoors, how that brought you out to California, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which a lot of people know where that is now, but when I was growing up, people didn't know where it was. As a matter of fact, many times in my life, people have said, oh, you're from New Orleans, and I'm not from New Orleans. I'm from an hour and a half west of New Orleans.
There's more to Louisiana than New Orleans.
Correct. And then people will be like, oh, you know what I mean, because people only know New Orleans. But in the last few years, I think that's changed because a film industry sprouted up in Louisiana long after I left. And some of that is in Baton Rouge and other areas. And so some people know what Baton Rouge is. But anyway, Baton Rouge, the Red Stick, the capital of Baton Rouge. So for California people, I guess it's like the equivalent of Sacramento. If Los Angeles is the New Orleans of California, then
Gotcha.
Baton Rouge is the Sacramento of Louisiana. And that's where I grew up, which actually is a good place to grow up because there is a lot of outdoor space available, though there's not a lot of outdoor recreation beyond hunting and fishing, shooting guns, and maybe like ATVs, or particularly three-wheelers when I was growing up. I think now it's more four-wheelers. But we did grow up with woods on either side of us. Where I grew up was at a dead-end street with woods all on one side of us. And then the rest of the neighborhood was off to the side of us. And it was a new neighborhood, so not that many people lived there at first, and they were building houses along the way. So I did have a lot of access to the outdoors growing up, but I didn't have access to any of the sorts of activities I do now. And that didn't really come about until I moved to Los Angeles. So at 24, I left Louisiana. I had gone to college in Louisiana, then graduated, waited for a girlfriend I had at the time to finish college, who was 2 years behind me, and then we were going to move out to Los Angeles together, and so that's what we did. And so that was 2002.
Okay.
I moved out to Los Angeles, lived there for a couple of terrible years where I didn't know anybody, and I didn't have any money, and I didn't have any good jobs, and I was working for minimum wage, and I was riding the bus, and it was miserable. And then I got a job finally directed in the career fields I was interested in, which was entertainment. And I finally had a little bit of cash, and so I was able to start doing things, and I found first I went through a breakup with that girl that I moved out with after being there for 4 years. And I don't know if you probably know this. A lot of people know this. When you go through a big life-changing event like a divorce or a breakup, this was someone I had dated for 8 years. What often happens is people look at their life and they decide, what do I want to change? What did I hate about my life before, and how do I change the direction of my life so it's more what I'm interested in? And so that's what I did. And so I was at that cut point. I was like, I'm going to change all these things. So then I finally got a decent job. Then I finally started getting income. Then I decided, I want to do all these outdoor pursuits. And so I started doing a variety of things, and I found a website when I was looking for climbing classes called Extreme Things. And it had an adventure club. And what that adventure club was the person who ran that club, who became a good friend of mine, Carl Domanger. He would put 2 to 3 activities together each month. And these activities ranged from everything from like hiking to like kind of off-trail hiking to canyoneering to beach hikes to ice climbing in Ouray, bungee jumping. You could do skydiving. He tried to hit everything. The main goal of the business was it worked for other businesses to do like retreats and special events and like team building activities.
Okay.
And so he had access to all of these different companies that offered all sorts of like ropes courses and things like that. So people could have all these activities. But then he wanted to get out on his own. And so that's why he had the adventure club. And so I went on everything. And so I'd go on every hike. I'd go on everything they did 2-3 times a month. And eventually, because this should turn into canyoneering at some point, right? Since you do have a canyoneering show. And hopefully everyone hasn't turned this off by this point. Eventually, one of the things that came up was canyoneering. And so I'm still in Los Angeles. I was in Los Angeles at that time. This was probably 2009 or something. And so at that time, Rich Carlson, who a lot of people listening to this show are familiar with, I believe he had moved out of Los Angeles and he had moved further north. So he wasn't guiding or teaching courses or anything. So the only people in LA at that time that offered any sort of canyoneering classes or guiding was a company called ATS, who some people are familiar with because they also have the ATS descending device. And so through his club, we were able to go on guided canyoneering trips with ATS. And so I did one of those. It's like either 2008, 2009, and then we did it again in 2010. And then by that point, I had started getting into climbing. And so I was learning all of the technical aspects of climbing. And my buddy Carl wanted to do more canyoneering also. And so the two of us eventually by about 2011 thought, hey, we know enough about, he was also search and rescue. So we thought we know enough about rope systems and various other things to get into canyoneering. And so then we decided to do that on our own.
How did that go for you?
It went great, and there were funny stories. Because the other thing at this time is ATS now, by the point around 2011 that we're interested, they're not even, I don't even think they were guiding anymore. And they also were not, they would offer classes, but they wouldn't fill up. So they just quit offering classes. Some people might be familiar with Uber Adventures. This is right before Uber Adventures was founded.
Okay.
In LA. So there was no sort of education in LA. And even at this point, I guess there really wasn't guiding at this point either. So when he and I decided to get into canyoneering, we're still using ATCs. We're still doing double roped rappels. What we did know, and keep in mind, he's also a search and rescue guy where they overboard everything.
So you're using like 11 mil ropes.
That's exactly where I'm going. So we knew that we would prefer to have static rope, not dynamic rope. And the only rope I could find that was static was that 11 mil red and white PMI rope that you can buy at REI or Sport Chalet that existed then, or any of those outdoor stores.
Right.
So we were carrying probably 200 feet of 11 mil rope. We didn't have rope bags. We'd coil after every drop. And for people listening to this in LA, I'm going to name some canyons there. So like when I first went out with ATS, they brought me to San Antonio Falls, which is a quick, easy, but really good canyon right off of Mount Baldy. It gets good flow, and then certain times a year it gets amazing flow. That was my first canyon. And then my second was Rubio, which can be kind of a joke canyon amongst people because it can be so beginner friendly, though it does have a 90-foot slippery drop that can be very intimidating. And in high flow, it can be an amazing canyon. So he and I would run that canyon over and over again, trying to build up to do other canyons in the area to make sure we had enough knowledge, which the next one on our list was Little Santa Anita LSA. And it's funny to think back on this one now because this is a canyon that we do at night and there's a pothole and we have potlucks in it. And then
Wow.
people will be, David Angel will hang from a rope in the pothole and be an aerial bartender that swings around. And so this has become a canyon that is thought of.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's actually quite amusing. He'll come up with specialty cocktails and he'll have a menu and he'll make like 2 different cocktails and then he'll right on the road where you wrap into the pothole. Everyone will be set down there with all the food out. And yeah, he'll just lock off right above, mix up some drinks, and then swing over and pass them around. And it's pretty amusing. It doesn't happen as much these days. It used to happen more when a buddy of ours, Alden Anderson, before he had moved away to Europe for 6 months, that turned into 5 years. And so it doesn't happen as much these days, but I think people are trying to bring it back. But yes, that canyon has become such a quick, easy thing to do that, we do it at night and it's no big deal. But Carl and I were working up our skills so that we knew we could do it. And then we knew we were going to do Eaton, which is basically LA's playground part, canyon. And that was our process. And so he and I just slowly built up our skills. And then eventually what would become Uber Adventures, that meetup was formed, and I found that. And I met Klaus, who formed Uber Adventures, and I met other people who were in that meetup. And suddenly I went from one friend that did canyoneering to more people that did canyoneering than any other activity that I did.
Wow.
And so then very quickly it became canyons all the time for a few years until I decided I want to do other things too and started backing off on it.
Awesome. So what inspired you to start your podcast?
So my podcast. So as I was saying earlier about when I was growing up in Louisiana, like I would have loved if I had been able to be a climber as a kid. I would climb trees and I would climb houses, but I didn't know any climbers.
Wow.
There were no climbing gyms. I found out later there was one climbing gym. I never heard of it, never knew where it was. So when I moved to LA and I kind of discovered all these things that were available there, because people can shit on LA and people who haven't been there picture it as like Hollywood or Beverly Hills. And so they think of it as this very urban, shallow, stupid kind of place. And there is some truth to that and there is some of that, but also LA is in an amazing place where it is centered, or not centered, but it's kind of south of the Angeles National Forest. It has the Santa Monica Mountains in the further south. It's got those San Gabriel Mountains up in the north. And then if you drive an hour or two in any direction, you can do almost anything that you want to do in the outdoors. And once I discovered that and once I joined that club and I found all these activities, it kind of ruined my life. This is the joke that I make that people who do long distance trails make too, because once you kind of separate yourself from all the bullshit to day-to-day life and then find these like kind of simpler existences where you're meeting all these people and forming these really tight-knit friendships because you spend time together doing things where you really, really rely on each other. You kind of stop caring about a lot of those other kind of things that just sort of feel more shallow. So I wanted to help other people ruin their life. And so that's why I started that web series at first. And then I work in video production, so it makes sense to do a video-based thing.
Yeah.
But as anyone who's ever done anything in that realm knows, it can be very time-consuming. And it requires a lot of other people to be involved, so it can be a real huge time suck. And so I did those 4 episodes, and they took a while to make. And then at some point after that, I realized it would be less work, though of course still more than I thought it would be, to do a podcast. And then they could be longer. I could talk to a variety of people about different sorts of topics, about different things. And I listened to podcasts all the time. especially when I worked as a designer or when I would do post-production work on a computer, I might have hours that I'm just sitting there. And so I'm either going to be listening to music or I'm going to be listening to podcasts. And so I was already interested in the form. And so I decided, okay, well, I may as well start one. And so this was 2014 is when I made that video series. And I believe it was the next year when I launched a podcast in 2015. And yeah, the whole point was, hey, I want to be able to get this information out to people that I wish someone could have gotten out to me 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's why I decided to start it.
Nice. I really like your format. You have definitely interviewed an array of people from like just hikers, backpackers, canyoneers. Did you do a surfer?
There have been a number of surfers on there, yeah. And the original web series, so
that's pretty great.
Which is still online, people can watch. The original 4-episode web series, I hit caving, canyoneering, hiking, and surfing. Nice. And so they were like roughly 5 minutes each, and it was, here is a person, one of which was my friend Carl, and one of which was Alden, who I mentioned earlier, and they would each be featured on an episode for an activity, and they would talk about their experience, how you could get into it if you were watching this. And then, of course, there was all sorts of B-roll to show the activity and get people maybe interested in it. And so those are the first 4 things I had. But yeah, once I did the podcast, I mean, really nothing was off limits. I've talked about fly fishing, which I don't know shit about fishing. We've had, I mean, canyoneers are often on the show because I know so many canyoneers. Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty much if you can do it outside, even sometimes not even outside. Early on, I had a cosplayer who was doing escape rooms on. So in my extended...
I listened to that. And I don't know much about escape rooms at all, but after listening to that, I was
You wanted to do it?
Yeah.
Sweet.
I was like,
Then
this sounds really cool. And I know they have some in Las Vegas. So I was like, maybe next time I go down there.
There are tons of them now.
I should try to do it.
When we recorded that, they were less common. They were kind of growing at the time. But yeah, now they're all over the place. But in my mind, if it is something that gets you active or some sort of non-standard activity, then I'm happy to talk about it. Most of the time, it's going to revolve around the outdoors. And most of the people I have on are kind of multi-activity people. And so we might hop between a variety of things. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about anything that gets people active and that gets people passionate. That's one of the most important things is I want to find the thing that person is passionate about and get them to talk about that, because that's when they come to live. That's when they have the most interesting things to say. And that's when the people listening get drawn in and really want to hear about it. And then maybe they want to try something what I wish more people would do. A lot of people tell me they listen to the show and they look for the names they know, or they listen to certain activities. And what I would love for more people to do. So people that are listening, if you're one of those people who've told me this is what I really want you to do. Pick some episodes that are not activities you do and listen to them, because you might be surprised that they inspire you to try to do something that you didn't realize you were interested in, or introduce you to something that you don't know much about.
Totally. Like I've listened to probably most of your episodes. Just because,
that is a lot of episodes.
Just
so
because my job is very tedious and I listen.
Thank you. Listen to all of them 10 more times so that we can start getting some of those ad dollars.
So did you start another one that's the 3 minutes, 3 hours?
Oh, so you're asking about the Hometown Explorers thing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I really was interested in the one that you did last time because I found out that it's very close to where my daughter lives in New York. The one that you did in New Jersey.
Yeah, the South Orange, New Jersey.
Yeah. And so when I go there in May, we're totally doing the ferry loop.
Okay, awesome. That makes me very happy to hear this. And hopefully you are going to get more people to want to listen to that or watch that.
And I've been to the show on Gunks. So.
Oh, have you? Yeah, so as a climber, I still have never been there. But hopefully one day I will make my way through that area.
It's a
gorgeous place, just from the photos I've seen.
I heard that David Bowie really loved that area and that his ashes are there.
Well, there you go. So if you like David Bowie, you have to go to the Shawanggunks.
Yeah.
So Hometown Explorers. This is where this came about. I'll take a long way around, but I'll try to make it not too long. So one of my past guests on the show, a guy named Ted Madison, who goes by Rander Ted, he does like hikes in the LA area, guided hikes and various things. And then he had also started a podcast called Wonder Outside, which is similar in format to mine, where he talks to everyday people about what draws them to the outdoors. He had been on my show in the past, and then he and I would talk periodically, and he is an actor also. And he's always trying to get video projects going and things as well. And so he and I would always try to think of ways to work together. So his show, Wonder Outside, one of the things I really like about his, other than just interviewing people, it's kind of like a magazine show in that it has different segments. And one of the segments that's a recurring one was called the 3x3 Main Street Challenge. And what he would do is he would find a place on a main street in a random city in the US. And then what he would need to do there is from that point on Main Street that he found, pick a place with an interesting outdoor activity that is 3 minutes away from there, 30 minutes away from there, and 3 hours away from there. And then he would talk about what those different places were. And every time I would listen to his show and I listened to that segment, I always thought it was a really good idea. And a while back, like probably 2 or 3 years ago at this point, I had pitched him this idea of, hey, what if we could make a video show where instead of you picking a place on Main Street and you telling people about it, we found people who lived in a place and they tell us, we challenge them to find something 3 minutes, 30 minutes, and 3 hours from where they live. And then they tell us why those places are cool. And he liked that idea. And we tried to make this happen a number of ways. I used to be one of the founders and co-owners of a production company called Butcherbird Studios, which I left a couple of years ago for a variety of reasons that maybe we'll get into, maybe we won't. And during my time there, I had that show pitched, but no one bought it. And the way I would most love to do this is like a TV series where he and I travel to these different locations, meet the person, they take us to these locations. Oh, yeah. I would love to make that happen. No one has been willing to pay for that. Right. When I decided to bring the podcast back, because as we haven't talked about, or did you say this earlier? Yes, you mentioned earlier, right? That, or yeah, maybe when I interviewed you.
I mentioned that I started mine because you stopped yours, but I don't think we really went into why you stopped yours.
Right. So I guess we'll get to that after this. I let it die during COVID for 3 years. And when I decided to bring it back in November of last year, 2023, I decided to do a number of things. In addition, I decided I wanted to try to do some bonus episodes in between main episodes. I decided to start a YouTube channel to go alongside with it, because what I always wanted to go get outside to be is not just a podcast. I want the podcast to be part of a bigger thing. Like ideally, I don't have a better word, so I call it a brand, even though I kind of hate that word because it insinuates that it's a thing that's emblazoned on people's minds and forces them to spend money, which isn't what I'm necessarily trying to do. Right. But anyway, I always want to go get outside to be something beyond just a podcast. I want it to be like a place you can go and you can find interesting videos and you can listen to podcasts, and then maybe other ways that it can branch out. So where it could be just the central hub where people who are excited about getting outside could continue to be excited about getting outside, and maybe also come up with new ideas of things to do. So I started that YouTube channel to go alongside of it, and wanting to create things to go on there seemed like a great time to do something with that Hometown Explorers idea. So Ted and I decided, okay, well, let's shoot some sample episodes, and the easiest way to do it these days is we're going to do is through Zencastr, but a Zoom style meeting software. So we don't have to meet with the person. He and I can record it from our homes. The person we're talking to can be at their house. They can tell us about it. Afterwards, I'll cut it together with photos and things they have of the area. And then I also would take the audio and release that as a bonus episode. And so that's what that is. So right now there's only one of those, but the idea is to do more of them. And hopefully, the big idea is that hopefully eventually we make those fairly regularly so that people start submitting ideas. We pick people to come on the show, but also I am hoping to eventually build a section on my website, gogetoutside.com, where you could go to the Hometown Explorer section, and then there you would not only be able to watch all the past episodes, but also look at a map.
Oh, cool.
And then look up where you live or look up somewhere you want to go visit, and then see what people have submitted. And maybe some of those submissions would take you to video episodes that exist, or maybe it would just take you to a write-up that someone could submit that just lists their areas. So I would love for it to become a resource eventually, where not only could you just go to be hopefully entertained by these videos or audio podcasts, but also where you could just decide like, oh, I'm going to Kanab. And then maybe 5 people from Kanab will have posted their 3x3 challenge, and you could find 15 interesting places to visit. That's the goal.
That's pretty exciting.
We'll see if that happens.
I liked the first episode that I listened to. It was really great. And like I said, it definitely inspired me to check out some stuff when I go out to New York. So
yeah, that's awesome.
I'm excited.
I'm very happy to hear that. We've recorded 2 of them. That next one should probably come out in April. And by the time this episode comes out, that episode should be out.
Yeah.
So when people listen to this, there should hopefully be at least 2 of them. And then I'm also hoping to do Hometown Explorers minis, which are just little like 2 to 5 minute, 2, 3, 4, 5 minute episodes where instead of it being the whole interview, it's just one person saying, hey, I'm whoever and I live here and this is my 3x3 challenge. And then they list the 3 places and have some video and photos.
That's cool.
And then maybe people could even submit those on their own without
Right.
having to use us as a resource to make that happen.
Sort of like voicemail or something.
Yeah, or people could record their own video and send it to us, and then we could upload it, or we could link to their video elsewhere. Or we'll see. Hopefully we can grow it into something else. I like that. Everyone that I tell about it says it sounds interesting, so we'll see if people really feel that way if they start watching or listening to it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was great. So I was like, what is in 3 minutes and, half hour and 3 hours from my house?
Yeah, and again, the original concept, Ted. So good old Ranger Ted Madison, A Wonder Outside, which go check out his podcast too, people. Come on, you need more podcasts. Go listen to that one too and tell him to start his back up again because he let his die as well.
When my dog died in January, I just needed to take some time to grieve her and process that. And so I'm still just kind of...
Do you work ahead on yours
that.
like I do?
I try to.
How many episodes do you usually?
So right now I have 4 that I need to edit. I just haven't made time to edit them. But just after she passed away, I had 0 mental capacity to do that. So I did let everybody know I was taking some time off. I'll get back. I'll get back when I can.
That seems like a reason that people will forgive you. Yeah.
Dog lovers, maybe not so much, but it's still so hard to come home and not have her here.
Right.
The cats try, but they're not the same. Anything else you want to say about your podcast, or should we get back into canyonneering?
I guess I'll just say a quick thing.
Why did you start doing
So the
it
reason
again?
I started again is two things. Well, maybe more than that. So like I said, I used to be part of this production company that I helped found. And basically what happened with that, why I left that company, is the kind of work we used to do and the kind of work we were starting to do had changed. And once a train is going a certain direction, it is really hard to steer it in a different direction. And the direction that our company was going and growing and becoming financially successful in a way it never had been was creatively not rewarding to me at all. And I was having a really hard time motivating myself to do any of our jobs anymore. And so me and one of the other founders, we both left. And in that time, I've kind of gone back to being a freelancer, which is what I was before. And as a freelancer, I was thinking, well, does it make sense to bring the podcast back? And then this company called Big Pond Podcasting, they reached out to me kind of out of nowhere. And I'd never heard of them. And I think they're a very small company. But they were the first company that ever reached out to me and was interested in helping me manage all the parts of the podcast I hate, which is ads and things like that, and the monetization aspect. I never tried to do that at all before. I would occasionally have like an ad read, and that was because people reached out to me asking me to do it. And those never paid well, by the way. If people heard an ad for some show and they thought, oh, Jason's making big money. No, right. Usually it was like $60, $80 or something like that. Yeah. And most of the times I said no, because I didn't think it was right for the show. A lot of the times the people would reach out to me, and often I would think, this isn't worth $80. I'd rather not have an ad attached to this show, not take the time to do this, and not have $80. But to bring back the show, I knew I needed to at least attempt to make it, try to generate some sort of income. And this company was going to handle putting ads into the show. They were going to handle bringing in people to place those ads. I would not have to worry about any of that. And also, when I joined their team, hosting and everything would now be covered by them. So for years, it's not a whole lot of money, but I'd be paying to host my RSS feed and all of those things. And now I don't have to worry about any of that. So when they reached out to me, I was like, well, is this kind of like a sign? Maybe I should bring it back. I've thought about it. It seems like a good time to give it a try. And so I decided ultimately to go ahead and do that and see if I can turn it into at least like a little bit of a part-time income, which so far it is not, but we'll see. But the reason I also want to mention this is I had said that towards the end when I let it die, I was kind of losing the passion for it, and I was getting kind of burnt out on it. And now that I've brought it back, it's been very nice because that passion has returned. One of the things that's nice about doing a podcast, and I'm sure you could probably agree with this, is you meet people and you have conversations with them that you maybe wouldn't have otherwise. And you learn really interesting things about people, and it just becomes an opportunity to like gain new knowledge and new experiences just by talking to people. And it's an excuse to do it instead of just trying to wait for it to naturally happen.
Yeah. Exactly. Like I wanted to know more about the Grand Canyon. I'm like, hey, Rich,
right.
Like talk to me. Like one of my favorite shows is the Grand Canyoneering movie, but
well,
the Last of the Great Unknown.
The funny thing too is I'll have people on the show and then I'll become friends with them. Like I don't know them. They'll come on the show, we'll become friends, and then we'll start hanging out and doing stuff together.
Right.
Yeah. One of the people, Ezgi, who appeared was the first episode of this new season. I didn't really know her very well before that. Now we're like climbing partners. We climb together all the time and stuff.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I make new friends doing the podcast too.
Right.
And it's the only way I know how to network. I am the worst person when people have like networking parties.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was saying I'm terrible at networking. Anytime I've ever gone to like a networking party or something, I just sit in a corner. I don't want to talk to anybody. I feel like a whore.
Right.
And I hate it. But the podcast, I already want to talk to these people. We're already interested in the same topics. We talk about things we're both passionate about, and then accidentally it becomes networking. And so it's super cool in that regard too. Networking, like in all ways, like person to person, like platonic relationship kind of way, but then also sometimes even in like a business sense. Like, I mean, Ted and I now are doing Hometown Explorers together. And so in that sense, it's networking. And then sometimes even it'll make people aware of me for whatever reason in other aspects of, like my professional life or something. So in those regards, it's been interesting and cool.
Awesome. So what do you see with the podcast moving forward?
I will continue to make it as I've been making it so far, which is hopefully an in-depth, interesting discussion with an individual person, occasional roundtables with multiple people about a topic. I'll continue to do the regular show like that. I am trying to build out the YouTube channel, which hopefully can have videos that people who would be interested in that sort of podcast would be interested in watching, whether it's informational or whether it's just for entertainment's sake or whether it's just beautiful footage of something or mini documentaries, things like that. Yeah. Hopefully I could get the podcast to a point where it makes just enough money so I can justify continuing to do it and then keep building out both of those things. Because if I can make enough money so that I can justify the time spent on it, then I can really work on trying to make quality things and not hurry up and get it out before midnight, before I go to bed, and make a whole bunch of concessions. Right.
I hear what you're saying there. Cool.
But you want to talk about canyoneering again, right?
Because I mean, we're probably boring our audience.
We probably are.
Because they probably want to go listen to your podcast now.
No, they're probably like, this is supposed to be about canyoneering, not about people talking into microphones.
So yeah, after you got into the Uber group and found out more about canyoneering, how did that go for you in California?
It went well. So the funny thing is, like, I've always thought about myself as a climber first and a canyoneer second, but in about 2012, once I joined that meetup group, it flipped for a while. And because I knew I was increasingly meeting dozens and dozens and dozens of canyoneers, and people were constantly inviting me on trips and things, then it was nonstop. And then at this point, I've gotten to go a lot of interesting places to do canyons. So early on, when I first got introduced, I was mostly doing LA-based canyons and then coming out here to Zion and doing Zion canyons. Because I guess technically the first canyoneering, and I'm doing air quotes right now, listeners, that I did non-technically would be top-down narrows. And so I knew I loved that. And so once I found out there was a more technical version of that, I was super interested. And then of course I knew Zion had all kinds of cool, interesting canyons, though I've never done MLA or heaps.
I haven't done heaps yet.
Okay. But since then, so I was mostly doing LA based and Zion canyons, but since then I've done other things in Utah, Arizona, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, Spain, Mexico.
Wow.
So I've gotten to do a little bit of traveling and do a variety of different types of canyons. And the funny thing is I started out doing so many out here, but I don't come out here as much anymore because I started doing more and more wet and water-based C class or like upper B class canyons. And then also I noticed that the Zion Park system started getting more and more overwhelmed, and getting permits and things was getting more difficult. So I just kind of gave up and stopped coming out here.
Yeah, honestly, Zion is in my backyard, and I don't even think I went there for Keyhole last year.
It's still an awesome place. I just don't usually go through the trouble.
It's really hard to get permits for there, and now they switched it to rec.gov, so I just don't really like to support that organization. And
understandably.
It's going to make getting permits. I mean, you used to be able to take a group of 6 through Pine Creek for $20, and now it's going to be like $20 a person, and that money's not going back to national parks. And
and there's often additional fees on top of it, and then
just to try for your permit, you're paying like $9, and then it's like a per person thing instead of per group, and it's just there's a lot wrong with rec.gov.
I am particularly unhappy with how they've impacted campsites.
Yeah.
Because places like Red Rock in Nevada, that has one official campground, it used to have first come, first serve walk-in sites, and you had to be at the campground to put money in an envelope and get one of those sites. And now they're still first come, first serve, technically, in the sense that you have to reserve them the same day, but you do it through recreation.gov from anywhere on the world. And if you are at the campground, which I have been before, this is how I discovered that this was the case. I walked over there and I'm like, where are the envelopes? And then I asked somebody that worked there, I was like, hey, I'm trying to get one of these walk-in sites. And they told me, oh, you should drive down the street to Albertsons. They got signal there. You need to go to recreation.gov and reserve the site, which to me defeats the whole purpose. Like it starts to kill the spontaneity. You no longer drive there and then hope for the best, knowing that there's a smaller pool of people trying to get these campsites. Now, anyone who wants to go there that day could try to reserve it before they leave their house, which I guess is kind of a positive if you're that person, but it sucks if you're already there.
Right. And the thing that with like canyoneering that I worry about is with Zion, you would have to check in with the rangers, and the rangers would talk to you about the safety issues and make sure that you knew about the weather and flash flood issues and things like that.
I have a very good story off of what you're saying right now about Subway, but yes, continue.
Yeah. So I feel like if you don't have that person to person contact, you might get people that don't really know what they're doing and get in over their heads more so than is already happening in the subway would maybe potentially happen in bigger canyons. And like, I think most people that are going to try to do a canyon like Imlay kind of know what they're getting into, you would hope. But I would hate to see like a beginner be like, oh, we can do Imlay Canyon and then get a permit for it and, not know what they're doing and get in way over their head, because I can see that happening really easy.
Yeah, I think even across the board outside of the recreation.gov thing, just because canyoneering is kind of a growing sport out here, more and more people are finding out about it, and the positive is there's more and more education available.
Yeah.
But there are more people who are sidestepping that. And like I was talking about earlier, Carl and I were like, we have to try really hard and really learn what we're doing so we can do this canyon, which now seems like a beginner, easy baby canyon to us. But I've met people who are like trying to do stuff I didn't do for a year or so for their first or second canyon. And they don't know what they're doing, and they don't know the etiquette, and they don't know how to deal with emergency situations or any sort of contingencies, and that gets worrisome. Yeah. And that's not just recreation.gov's fault. Right. That's just kind of growing pains. But I do have a story for you that I think you'll find very entertaining about exactly that issue in Subway. And this was back before recreation.gov. And when you did still have to go sign something in front of a ranger and have a conversation with them, this was probably about 2012. So that friend of mine, Carl, this is when he still had that adventure club. We wanted to bring the adventure club through Subway.
Okay.
But the great thing about Carl is he always vetted every activity first. So he never did the thing where it was, hey, let's meet at the trailhead and figure it out together. And that was not his style.
Okay.
So he and I went, just the two of us, to run Subway, make sure we were familiar with it, make sure it was appropriate to bring new people through, make sure we knew how to get through it. And then the idea was later that year, we'd bring the whole club through if we decided it made sense.
Okay.
So we sign the paper that says, here's what to do in case of flash floods. Here's what to be aware of. You need to have these items. Do you have these items? We did all that. We checked all that off. We picked up our permit, went to Wildcat, did the hike in. And along the way, and again, this was about 12 years ago, we were having a little trouble figuring out exactly where the drop-in was. We ended up dropping in right at the end of Russell Gulch, which ended up not being a big deal. Basically, we dropped in where that final wrap.
Okay.
Like since then, I've done with the Russell Gulch approach. So it's
Right.
basically that final wrap.
Okay.
Which would not have been a problem except for one thing. Earlier when we were hiking in, we saw this group of what looked like young college kids, and there was like 10 of them. And they looked confused. And we said, let's hike ahead. We don't want to get stuck behind this group. So we turn off where we're like, we're not sure if this is the right way, but let's check it out and then see what it is. And then we get there and we're like, well, this might not be the right place, but we know we could drop in here and I bet it meets up with it and we'll be good. And we look behind us and those 10 college kids are behind us. And I say, hey guys, we don't know that this is the right way. You might not want to follow us. And they say, okay. So we rig a rope. We wrap down. It's not a long drop. It's like maybe 50, 60 feet, whatever it is right there. And then we get down and then we look up and they're trying to rig a rope. And then I forget exactly what happened, but some of them start to go down and it was kind of like a 2-tier thing. So they get down to the second ledge because you could kind of handline that. And we are communicating with them because, I know what it was. We were saying, hey, if you just want to wrap down our rope, or it was two things. It was, if you want to wrap down our rope, we can wait a second to pull it. But also, I'm pretty sure this is the wrong place. If you guys wait right there, I'll run ahead and see where the right place is.
Yeah.
And during that time, I do that. I run ahead. I find the right drop in. It's not that much further. And then as I'm coming back, we find out they also signed that piece of paper, right? And what that piece of paper said is you need to have a harness, you need to have a rope, you need to have a carabiner, you need to have a rappel device, you need to have a length of webbing. They had one of each of those items.
Yep.
And 10 people.
Yep.
And none of them had ever used
Any of those items.
What had happened is the leader of their group, she would periodically set up adventure trips for these people to do. They wouldn't know what it was going to be, and they'd all go, and she saw a YouTube video.
Oh, God.
About Subway, and she thought that looked really fun. So she got everybody to agree to do it, and none of them thought they needed to learn how to use these devices. So half of them are already down on this ledge, and we say, no. Nobody else come down. Keep going along this ridge. I found the drop-in. You'll be able to hike down.
Yeah.
We'll get these people off this ledge. Okay, guys, just wrap down our rope. We don't know how to do that. Okay, so Carl and I start talking. We're like, there's no way we're going to teach these people how to rappel.
Because you're already at the bottom of the rappel.
Yeah, we're like, we're not going to teach them how to rappel. They don't have harnesses. They have one harness. We can't just keep sharing it. We have a bunch of webbing because we came in with way more shit than we need because we're still fairly new with this. Like, we know enough so that we're not these guys.
Right.
But we also are always bringing way more than we need because we're never sure what we're going to have to deal with, right? And we know enough to be able to deal with the things that we suspect we'll have to deal with, which in this case is now guiding 10 people. Now, keep in mind, we're doing this trip because we want to see if we can bring the people in our adventure club through safely.
Yeah.
If we can get these 10 people through this, we can definitely get our adventure club through this.
Oh my gosh.
So what we decide to do is Carl's going to reascend the rope. Thankfully, it's only like maybe 30 feet or something. He's going to get to the ledge. He's going to take all our webbing, and he's going to build all of them Swami belts.
Oh, okay.
And then we're going to lower them. Because, again, we talked about this, you and I, earlier today. When you do your first rappel, it's, okay, we're going to have to make your way over the lip. Okay, put your legs a little further. Okay, now we can't do, we'll be here
With
forever.
10 people, it's going to be.
Right, we'll be here forever. Yeah. Thankfully, I got half of them to hike ahead to go to the right drop-in. So he gets up there. We tie him in. I lower him. Tie in the next person, lower him. Tie in the next person, lower him. And then for the rest of the day, they were like little puppies following us through the canyon. And we could always, we would help them through something. Then we'd stop to start coiling our rope. And then they'd be like, oh, thanks. And they'd hike ahead. And we knew when the next obstacle was because they'd be waiting for us as soon as we got there.
Oh, man.
So they only brought one of each item, including one carabiner. But what they did have was 2 life vests, because 2 of the girls in the group didn't know how to swim, and they knew there would be swims. So they had at least had the foresight to bring them life vests. So yeah, for the rest of the day, we would lower them down things, set up hand lines where we could. This was back when you could still, towards the end, right before you get to the subway section, there was a log that you used to hike. So this was when that log was still there, and you could still wrap off of that log. And you could wrap down like into that waterfall room. So Carl and I were going to do that, but we were like, you guys are not going to do that. We're going to set up a hand line from you across, and you're going to meet us down there.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, so we get them through the whole thing. They're having a great time. And then we do the hike out, and we get back to the cars. And we're like, okay, good. We're done with them. It's 8 p.m. now.
Wow.
It's night. And the girl walks up and she says, hey, I left the keys at the shuttle car up ahead. Can you give us a ride? Now, we were low on gas because gas stations closed very early in the area, and we weren't able to fill up the night before. So we were able to say, we don't know if we have enough gas. If you go to the street, I'm sure a hitchhiker will pick you up and take you to your keys. Wow. And so we felt our work was done. And then we were positive that we could bring the adventure club through. And we did later in the year, and there were no incidents with them.
You brought multiple harnesses and...
Yeah. Nice. Each person had at least one carabiner and rappel device.
I can't tell you
harness.
The amount of times I have gotten to the subway part where the rappel is, and like we had a group of, I don't know, you can get, I think, 12 on your permit for the subway.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
And I think we had like 6 or 8, and all of us had our own helmets, our own harnesses, our own gear, our own snacks, all of the things, right? And we get there, and there's 2 groups of 12 in front of us, and they have 1 harness each.
Oh,
and so
one harness each, or one harness for
one
all
harness
of them? For each group?
Yeah, each group had one. So
they're sharing the harness.
24 people in 2 harnesses. And so my friend Ron takes off his harness, and he hadn't put his on yet, but he was like, here, maybe someone in the group can use this so you can get ready. And I give them mine too. And the lady's like, I think these 2 are enough. And I'm like, we were sitting there for at least an hour waiting for our turn to rappel. I swear to God, there was some guy in a beaver mascot costume above us on top of the cliff, just like dancing around. I'm like, does somebody have some popcorn, and where are the candy camera?
Man, you guys are super nice, because you could have easily... How big was your group? 2? Is that what you said?
No, we had like 6 to 8, I think.
Oh, okay.
We had a lot.
I feel like you could easily have walked up and be like, we are each wearing our own harnesses, and we know how to rappel. We can go through this section really quickly while you guys are swapping the harness next.
And there was a time when my friend Lisa and I came up on a similar situation, and we were just like, it's just the 2 of us. Could we just please... Because we had done DOS boot. And we just asked if we could jump on the rope and like go down, because they had a huge group too. And it was like a lot of kids, and they were taking a lot of time. And instead of just letting us slide down their rope, they pulled their rope. We had to set our rope. It's a 30-foot rappel. Like, it would have taken us way less time to just slide down their rope. But some people don't like other people using their gear, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, the subway is fun.
At least they had gear.
Yeah. That one particular group had gear.
Yeah.
Yeah, subways. I'm really, really grateful that I didn't ever get permits when the first time that I wanted to go, because we would have been those people that were in way over our heads. I had no idea how to rappel at that time. And by the time I actually was with people that pulled permits, I had been canyoneering for like a year or 2. And so I had way more knowledge. But
also, thank goodness it's barely technical.
Right.
Because if it was more technical, we might still be there trying to get that group through there 10 years later.
Right.
Because they're really, almost every rappel's optional. Yeah. And the ones, I'm trying to think, there even are some that aren't. And if they are, they're pretty short.
Well, now that log is gone, that rappel into the subway is definitely required.
Right.
some people will jump over the crack, but it's really slippery, and so many broken ankles happen in that spot. So not recommended. But some
Right.
people will jump over because you can down climb. But to me, it's not worth the risk of breaking your ankle right there because
No.
people have had to spend the night.
And I do know a person who broke her ankle in Subway like after the first drop. And she is tough as hell.
Wow.
Because she got herself through the entire canyon and back up to the trailhead. It was late, but she did it. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a strong woman.
Yeah.
Because my most unfavorite part of the Subway is after you leave the Cascade Falls, and then you have like, I don't know, 3 miles of river walking.
Yeah. And then
that exit up.
Yep.
But
Then she did that climb up with a broken ankle. Wow. Just crawling.
That's
That's
impressive. So what are some of your favorite canyons?
some of my favorite. Let me see if I maybe go by area. So in the LA area, there are a few good ones, especially it depends on the season. So like last year we had amazing rains.
Yeah.
And so canyons that haven't been good in years were fantastic. The big one everyone loves in LA is Eaton. And early on I did love Eaton, and I still like Eaton, but I don't necessarily need to do it anymore. San Antonio Falls in that area is a really fun one to do, especially when it has good water. And for a couple of years, I was trying to shoot a video of it in the snow. And I got really lucky and got to shoot it covered in snow. And that canyon in snow is really cool. But also, if you do it at the right time of the year, sometimes you'll come down and there'll be like a little snow bridge at the end. So that's really fun. I haven't done a whole lot in Colorado Ouray area, but there were a few of them that I did that were super fun. It's Right Fork Mineral Creek. It's really beautiful. It has this really exciting entry where you basically leap into what's like a slot, and there's a hydraulic, and you've got to swim out of that hydraulic, and then you get shot down this tunnel and pop out into the river, and where it widens back up again. And then there was another section through there where you wrap off a log on one side, on like down canyon right side of this waterfall, toss your pack so you can shimmy behind the waterfall.
Wow.
And then leap over the recirculating current so you can swim out and rejoin your backpack on the other side. So that's super fun too.
And you probably have to do it like fast enough that your backpack doesn't float away, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, once one person's down, they babysit everything and like hang out with a throw bag. But the first person probably wants to be pretty fast.
And that one's in Ouray?
Yeah, that's right for, it's technically Silverton.
Okay.
So, but which is close enough.
Right.
There's a lot of really good stuff in Silverton because there's also that Durango Water Park one, which you can like run in like 20, 30 minutes. Some people do it and don't even bring technical gear and do it in swimsuits.
Nice.
I had a lot of, so I did a road trip in 2015 where I drove up to the PNW. It was a trip like this where I was also recording podcast episodes. I drove up to the PNW, did some stuff in Oregon and in Washington that were all great. Then I went to Salt Lake City for the OR show, and then I went down to Ouray for the Canyon Festival. And so we did a bunch of stuff in Ouray and in Silverton. And despite how good the canyons were or not, that's still like one of my best canyon trips. Just the way everything worked out. I met so many people at that rendezvous. Everyone was staying in a house together. So there was like 20 people sharing this house, this rental house.
Yeah.
And so it was just like great camaraderie, super fun time. And then the canyons were in really good form that year. So I did do Upper Uncompahgre, which was fun. And it's not really a water slide section, but there's a section where it funnels up. And you basically would have to stem across this little section, and then all the water's just funneling down into this little area. You drop into it, it pulls you under, and then it just shoots you down.
Yeah, that's what I've heard about.
And then you pop out on the other side. Yeah, but underwater.
Yeah. Right.
And then you pop up on the other side, and everyone had the exact same expression.
I think that's where Becky was talking about, where she's like, I almost died, but it was so much fun.
Everyone pops up with the biggest smile on their face. It's just such a fun little flume that you go through.
That sounds awesome.
And yeah, that was my favorite part of that canyon. I did another one out there called Deadwood, which was unique for a few reasons. It's up above Silverton. As a matter of fact, you can see the train that passes all the time while you're in the canyon. It is the slickest canyon I've ever been in the United States.
Is it high enough it's in the alpine zone, or is it lower than that?
I don't think it counts as alpine right there, but I could be wrong. But it has, the reason it's called Deadwood is there's old mining debris, including buildings in the water flow. And so as you get near the end of the canyon, you rappel off of the debris of like an old mining building.
Wow.
And when you look back at the canyon, looking up canyon on the left side, way up in the sky, or not way up on the sky, way up on the wall, there's this big hole where a mine cart, I guess, used to go. And you can see the track, and the track is bent as if it exploded. It looks like what you would see in an Indiana Jones movie where they'd be on a mine car and then suddenly there'd be light and then they just fly out into the air because it looked like that. It looked like the other side of that from an Indiana Jones movie. And we were in that canyon. So the thing about Colorado canyons is if you wait on the weather, you'll never do a canyon.
Right.
Because it changes every hour. And while the few hours we were in Deadwood Canyon. Oh, and as you're rappelling down at the end, like the train will be coming by. It's cool. But in the time we were in Deadwood Canyon, sunshine, rain, thunderstorm, hail, sunshine. And by the time we got to the final wrap, which is about 200 feet, I was the last one down, and it was just fucking thunder.
Wow.
Going off. And this rappel I should have been enjoying, I was just like, I want to get the fuck out of this water with all this lightning going off. I get down, sun comes out.
Oh my God.
We go into town, get funnel cakes, it starts hailing. And this is all within like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, I remember when we were in Ouray last year. Is it last year? I think it was 2022 that we were in Ouray last. But we knew that there were thunderstorms coming in. And at that time, I was having like a lower back leg issue. And it was when my shoulder just barely started to flare up. And so I was like, if I can make it to the canyon, I'm going to do like lower oak. The rest of the group some of them were going to do full oak. My husband and some of his friends just did like middle and lower. And I was like, if I can meet you, I'll be at lower oak. And I actually made it there, was super stoked. Like it took me a long time, but we made it. But we also had a cutoff of like, if they're not to us by noon, because we know that the thunderstorms are coming in at 2, like we can't go. So they got to us at 12:30, and me and my friend are like, it's kind of past the point, and like we did see some black clouds coming in and stuff. So we decided to turn around because they already had a big group. I think there were 6 to 8 of them, and then we would have added 2 more, but they were already in a pretty good flow. And so we start hiking back to the car, and then we just hear like that.
That was so well timed.
Well timed. I hit my microphone, but it was thunder and lightning. And it started downpouring on us. But my husband said they got to the 170-foot rappel, and that's when the thunder and lightning started coming in. And if I would have been on rappel at that time, I would have completely panicked, and my anxiety would have been through the roof. And I feel like when you're in those types of situations, you're more likely to make mistakes, right?
Yeah, for
and
sure.
then errors are going to happen. And so even though I missed out on the canyon that day, like everybody else went through and made it out. The rain started after they were finished rappelling, as they were just like hiking out, which was nice. But it downpoured, like it fucking downpoured.
When that same trip, a day or 2 before, we had done Cascade, which is that big fall you can see from Ouray.
Right.
And there is a bailout point before the last maybe quarter or fifth of the canyon. And we started getting clouds rolling in, and like it looked like bad weather was coming. And everybody was just started to move so fast. And we were like, let's just take the bailout. Yeah. And then, the rain came. And then the next day, the cool thing when you use the bailout is, well, you can take it back in the next day and then just finish the last section of the canyon, which I'm glad we did. Because that last part of the canyon is really beautiful. There's that 300-foot drop at the end, but even everything leading up to it is really interesting and beautiful right there. Yeah. And then it's just cool to be able to be rappelling into town essentially. And I have a fun story about when we got off that rappel as well. So if anyone has ever come across anyone jokingly using the term scuba climber, it comes from that day. We finished in Cascade. We're down in the parking lot of the trailhead, and as we're all hiking out, we still have our wetsuits on, but in our harnesses, this woman pulls up to us, like turns her car and stops in front of us, and she rolls down her window, and she says, "Are you guys climbers or scuba divers?" And so then some of us would just start referring to canyoneers as scuba climbers from that point forward. Yeah, and it's all due to that lady.
I've been suiting up in Pine Creek before, and somebody's asking me where I'm going to dive. And
Yeah. They seem very confused. But you were asking about Great Canyons. So the Sierra Nevada in Central California, pretty much every canyon there is awesome. But ones that are particularly special to me are Jump Canyon, Seven Teacups, and Big Creek. And I think it's just because of like when in my canyon career or whatever you call it, I did those and who I've done them with. But then also, if you've never done Jump Canyon and you like jumps.
Jump and Seven Teacups are high on my list.
They're both just fun.
Would it be feasible to do a trip to hit both of those like from here? Or are they too far apart? Are they kind of...
they're a little bit of a ways from each other. Like you wouldn't want to do them like... You wouldn't be able to do them like back to back.
In a weekend or whatever?
Not in a weekend, okay. Like maybe a long weekend.
Gotcha.
Because Seven Teacups is down by Kernville,
yeah,
and then Jump is closer to like Fresno.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was
So they're a bit of a distance. But if you were on like a trip for a week or something, absolutely, right. Yeah. And both of those are great ones to do. And Teacups is another one of those where I need to build up to be able to do that one. But if you hit it at the right time, it's very beginner friendly. But if you hit it at the wrong time, it's super advanced and super scary and potentially dangerous.
Yeah.
That was the first Class C canyon of that type that I ever did, where you can just jump and slide. And yeah, that was such a great day when I did that for the first time. It's still fun. It's not nearly as fun as that anymore. And after doing Jump and other Sierra canyons, it seems a lot more tame. But the first day I did that is still like amongst one of the most exciting canyon days. And then another canyon that's super unique that I recommend for people is, have you ever heard of Choyadero? It's in Mexico. It's in Chiapas, so it's in South Mexico.
Okay.
It is a cave.
Oh.
But it's basically canyoneering in a cave because the cave's always wide and you hike up. Well, you can do it from the bottom as well, but the best way to do it, you hike up, you drop in because the cave is essentially a really long tunnel. So you drop in from one opening on one side, and then it's just rappels, slides, down climbs, jumps for like 7-8 hours in the dark until you pop out on the other side of the canyon and swim out into this like park area.
That sounds incredible.
Where they have day hikers and all sorts of things. And we encountered bats like towards the end, and birds flying around inside the canyon and nesting birds. And it's just a nice, unique experience because it's both caving and canyoneering. Like it sincerely is a canyoneering trip in a cave.
That sounds
like really it's the cool. Most like doing canyoneering in a cave that I think you can do, because it never gets to a point where you feel like you're truly caving. It always feels like you're canyoneering. You just happen to be in the dark.
And you don't have to ascend back out when you're done.
No, and you don't have to ascend back out when you're done. Yeah.
Very cool. And somewhere you could probably go in the wintertime, yeah?
I'm not sure, but...
I guess some places in Mexico are high. They get cold.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. But if you check out RopeWiki, it's on RopeWiki, and it's all sorts of information there, and it could probably verify.
Nice.
But and you can turn that into a really good trip where you can also do some other canyons in the area that aren't as exciting as that one. But then also, I've never gotten to do it, but they have what's called La Ventana, which is a river trip you can do, a kayaking trip, and it's supposed to be like one of the most beautiful kayaking trips you can do.
Wow.
And that's in the same region. And when we did it, I think it was 2018, and I'm not going to get into the whole story because it's a long one, and it's actually something I hope to do a special episode of my podcast about one day. But our friend Scott, who put the whole trip together, started having ankle problems, and so our trip turned into this crazy thing where we had to get into the emergency room, Mexican emergency room, like pass armed guards, and then like get our way into a room with a doctor that had like glaucoma in one eye.
Oh my
Didn't look like he could see. And yeah, it just turned into this weird, exciting trip. Like very long, extended, arduous trip to try to get him medical care. But once we got him medical care, he was better the next day. They didn't charge us anything.
Wow.
It was free, but the whole experience to get there and to get into the room was the most unique medical experience I've ever had.
It would be
in my
kind of
life.
cool to hear like what different countries' medical processes are like, kind of.
I mean,
you know, like you never think about getting hurt when you go on
Yeah,
vacation
yeah.
or whatever, but we do these things where it could happen to anyone at any time. So
the funny thing is we went there to do that cave. It's amazing. But when we talk about that trip, we talk about the
Emergency
because
room.
as much as the cave was unique and exciting, it was still canyoneering, which we all do all the time.
Yeah.
But this whole adventure of getting him medical care, we never have that experience. At one point, our buddy Ben turns to Scott, and Scott was saying something like, sorry guys, sorry that we're having to do all this. And Ben was like, oh, it's actually pretty fun. He's like, I'm having a good time. Yeah, I had to pretend he was my brother. I was the only one in the group that could speak Spanish at the time. And so I'm trying to communicate for everybody. We had to take pictures of his x-rays with our cell phones. It was such a weird, exciting experience. Also on that trip, half of the people also got food poisoning.
oh, that's the worst.
Or not food poisoning, probably, poisoning from dirty water.
water.
Yeah, so half of the people got sick, but it was an awesome trip. Partly because of all those things, in addition to the super cool cave. But yeah, that ranks as like one of the more unique canyoneering experiences you can have is to go do that cave. I would highly recommend it to anybody that is a canyoneer.
Right. That sounds amazing. The International Canyonneering Rendezvous is in Mexico this year.
Do you know what part by chance?
I don't remember.
Because Mexico is so large, I bet
Right.
it's not there.
Yeah.
But if it is, I feel like it probably must be somewhere that has more canyon. I feel like there's only like 2 or 3 canyons right
In
there.
that area. Yeah, I kind of looked it up, but I don't really know Mexico very well, and I think that the dates were not when I could go. So I'll have to look it up. Throw it in the show notes or something if anyone wants to go. Mexico
If
Canyoneering.
anybody wants to go, she's looking for people to fly with.
Anything else you want to add about canyoneering?
Don't do it. Too many people already do it.
Right.
No, not really. No,
Don't do stupid shit. While you're
yeah, don't do stupid shit. Yeah, make sure you. I feel bad saying make sure you get educated because I never took any classes, but I learned from a lot of other people. And I did, even though it's not the same thing, I did take lots and lots of climbing classes before I got into canyoneering. So there's at least some crossover.
Yeah.
And then by the time I got into canyoneering, I always went with people who were more trained than me, more informed than me, and then they taught me the skills that I have at this point. Yeah. So I did see something on Facebook recently where someone was complaining about people removing an anchor in a canyon, and everyone jumped on that person and said, you should know how to build an anchor. And so I would like to see less of that happening, less of people going into canyons ill-prepared
Yeah.
or expecting or somehow having in their mind that the people who went through before them were supposed to have provided everything they need
Right.
to have their proper experience. So if you're a person listening to this and you think it's other people's responsibility to build anchors for you and make sure the canyon is in good condition for you, that is not the case. You need to make sure you have the skills because you never know what's going to happen. And you want to be prepared for whatever can happen.
Well, you also need to rebuild anchors from time to time.
Yes.
Like I've been through canyons when we replaced the webbing, and the very next day, my friend took her boyfriend through, and that very same anchor had been chewed through by a rodent.
Right. You need
And
to know how
like-
to inspect that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's another time where a different canyon we went through, replaced the anchor, the webbing on this rock. In retrospect, we probably should just have fiddlestick that spot, but we just slung a big thing of webbing. But a flash flood came through a couple of days later, and it like packed inside the webbing somehow. And we had like a foot of like dirt and debris inside the webbing that was like, it was nuts. And that was within a few days. And so some people are like, you need to write the date that the webbing was changed and how long it is and blah, blah, blah. But that's irrelevant.
Yeah.
If, weather or rodents or things like that happen. And if you don't have the experience and knowledge to know how to change those anchors, like what's going to happen to you.
If you're not inspecting every single anchor you come up to every single time,
Right.
you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
And so whether or not somebody took a bolt out, like you should have the supplies and the skills to be able to get out of that situation anyway. And I feel like
Agreed.
if the bolt is there, you can choose to use it or not use it, but the damage has been done and they should stay. And my boss is not going to be happy that I said that out loud. But I've also been with him when we've put anchors in because of places like Behunin. On the chalk stones, you just get like every color of webbing because nobody trusts the brown webbing. So they're going to add their black webbing and they're going to add their blue webbing because they don't trust those webbings. And instead of taking the webbing out, they just add a new piece of webbing to it. And so you get there and there's like this whole junked up spot of so much webbing. Have you ever been in a situation like that?
I'm a multi-pitch climber. So what you're describing is every single rappel anchor are on every multi-pitch climb. So
Well, it freaks me out.
one of the things I like about being both a climber and a canyoneer is I get to see the positives and negatives of both and
parts.
learn the skills from both because many climbers hate rappelling.
Yeah.
And they want to avoid it at all costs. And if you rappel multi-pitch routes, you understand it because you typically climb featured routes. Canyoneers typically rappel water courses that have made it smooth.
Yeah.
So rope pull issues and things getting caught on knobs, that happens all the time when you're rappelling as a climber. So rappelling as a climber can be a huge pain in the ass, but also because they don't like to do it, they're not adept at it. So when you get to anchors, what you're describing, that big bird's nest, it's all of them. I've been to anchors where there are literally 10 or more slings of varying stages of decay around the same tree.
Yeah.
And carabiners.
Like, well, I don't know which one I should trust, so I'm just going to throw my own on there.
Right. And then they stay for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if you would want to clean them and cut off all the bad ones because whoever comes behind you might be like, what crazy person came through here and only used one piece of webbing?
That's my job as a canyoneer now. I do that. Sometimes I come home with a whole backpack full of assorted stuff. It's pretty great.
Yeah, so you should definitely. It's a good thing you didn't get into climbing, like you told me earlier, because you would be very annoyed by multi-pitch rappel anchors.
I never got to do multi-pitch. We just did a lot of single pitches, but I never any trad. It was all sport routes.
Multi-pitch climbing is the best type of climbing, in my opinion. It's the most fun, most exciting. I always say it's like backpacking is to hiking. Like hiking, day hike, that's fun. Backpacking, always more rewarding than day hiking. Same thing with multi-pitch climbing, in my opinion, to single pitch cragging.
It'd be like more exhilarating and
there's often a hike out.
Yeah.
It's more of an adventure because you're probably hiking out somewhere. You're bringing a bunch of gear with you. You've got to get up all this stuff. Certain points, you might hit a point where it's easier to go up than to come down because you're so close to the top.
Yeah.
And then you're either wrapping off or you're hiking off, and then you're hiking back. So it can turn into a long day, short day. It just depends on what you're doing and who you're with. But yeah, it's super rewarding, super fun. And I remember you saying that climbing doesn't have good views. When you do multi-pitch, you get way more interesting views.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it probably changes the view a little bit better than that same like 30 feet. That you
and the routes tend to vary and the pitches might be very different. So you might get different styles of climbing, even on the same pitch sometimes. Like you might be switching from face to chimneys to slabs and back and forth.
Yeah.
I know this is a canyoneering podcast, but there's a route that I particularly like in Red Rock, a climbing one called Tunnel Vision. And part of what makes it fun is you get to pitch 4 or 5, I forget which one, I think it's 5. And there's a detached flake that has formed a tunnel behind it. It's 60 feet long.
Wow.
And so you go up this route and it's mostly like chimneys and face climbing. And then you climb through a tunnel behind a flake and then you pop out on the other side and continue up to the top.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's just a cool, unique, interesting experience to have.
Right.
You're at that point, you're 600 feet up or something, and you're climbing behind a big flake.
That's insane. That's in Red Rocks in Vegas?
Yep.
Awesome.
Red Rocks in Vegas.
Huh. That sounds awesome.
So probably my favorite place to climb that I've ever climbed.
Taking my nephews to the little Calico Basin. They have a couple cool rocks that you can just like climb up and
off
of.
Yeah. And Red Rock has good canyoneering also.
Yeah, I've done a couple there actually.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned it, I remember one year I went down for my birthday. It was in March, and it snowed at Red Rocks. So we're like hiking up and doing this approach, and there's like all the snow. And then by the end of the day, it's like all melting and there's like waterfalls everywhere. And then the next day we did motorcycle canyon over by the dam, and it was like 70 degrees and so hot.
Right,
We're
yeah.
like, March is so bipolar.
Desert life.
Yeah.
No, Red Rock's awesome because great canyons, great climbing of almost every style you could want. If you're a boulderer, if you're a sport climber, if you're a single pitch trad climber, if you're a multi-pitch trad climber, if you're a big wall climber, all of it's there. And then awesome canyons too.
Well, awesome. Canyoneering makes me super hungry. What is your favorite in canyon snack?
I was wondering when we were going to get to these because I was starting to think, man, I'm making you have a really long podcast episode that's mostly about podcasting instead of canyoneering. Okay, so I know these questions and I have thought about them before. So gummy bears are great, and I love gummy bears of all types, but particularly, are you familiar with the Sprouts natural gummy bears? Do you know what Sprouts? Do you have Sprouts out here?
It's a grocery store Sprouts?
It's a grocery chain, yeah.
We don't have it here, but they have it in Vegas.
So Sprouts has this bulk section where you can, bulk buy all kinds of things. And one of the things they have in there are what they call their all natural gummy bears. So they're made with actual fruit juice.
Nice.
They're the most delicious gummy bears I've ever had in my life. To give you an idea, when my parents come to visit, my dad always asks us to take him to Sprouts to get the gummy bears because one time he came and he bought 2 pounds of gummy bears to take home. And within 2 days before he'd gotten on the plane, he'd eaten all of the gummy bears because they're really good. So my favorite canyon snack, also favorite backpacking snack because gummy bears are a great reward after a high climb. Yeah. Sprouts, natural gummy bears.
I'm stopping at Sprouts next time I see my sister for sure. What's your favorite after canyon beverage?
So this is a newer thing for me. My favorite after any activity or strenuous activity beverage for proper hydration, coconut water.
I love coconut water.
So I used to, like a lot of times I'd get like a Gatorade or some sort of, fuck all that.
Yeah. So anytime,
yeah, it's got so much sugar and other crap that like kind of makes you feel gross. Every time I drink coconut water, I'm like, wow, I feel like I can feel the hydration in my body. Like I'll be like, well, my arms feel hydrated, which I don't feel when I drink a Gatorade. And then I don't feel like gross or like I'm gonna have any come down. It's refreshing. I feel hydrated, and then I actually feel better.
Now you're getting magnesium and potassium.
Yeah, it's got all that
many
extra
vitamins
stuff
and stuff from the coconut milk.
Coconut water
Yeah.
is now my go-to post anything beverage.
I found there's better brands than others. Have you found one that you really
absolutely.
like?
Shit, I can't think of their names. There's one, is it Vita Coco that I do like or I don't like?
That's what I can't remember too. This was like one of them's really coconutty.
I think I don't like that one. I think there's one in the can. It's like kind of a tall can, and it has,
and it's like rigid, kind of.
Yeah, that's the good one. Mm-hmm. And it's I like it with the pulp too.
Yeah. Like the chunkies.
Whichever that one is, pay for sponsor this podcast.
We'll find out what they are. And
I wish I knew which one it was. But yeah, that one's good.
I'm visualizing it because they have like a green one and a blue one and like.
Yeah. And don't buy like the mango. Just buy the regular coconut. When they add flavors, it sucks.
It totally
just get regular
it up.
Coconut water.
Yeah, the lime one's not good.
Yeah.
Is there a piece of gear that you always carry with you?
Harness. I would highly recommend everyone doing a canyon carry a harness on their body that they wear. Yeah. I think that's important. And a descender and a rope. No, I've thought about this when you ask other people this question. I don't have like any special thing that I bring that everyone else wouldn't already have, other than maybe just like good friends that are also good canyoneers. That would be my recommendation. Bring good friends that are also good canyoneers.
How has canyoneering impacted or changed your life? I
would say canyoneering, along with a lot of the other stuff I do, we talked about it earlier, it's ruined my life.
Right.
So it's helped me see like things that are important about life that are not material objects. I mean, I was never like a super materialistic person, but definitely like just outdoor stuff in general, kind of discovering those things and making them part of a lifestyle instead of a vacation activity. I think that has given me a richer life in general. And canyoneering, I mean, you get to see amazing places. I really like the wet ones because the water's cold and it feels good. And you do fun stuff in cold water and you jump things and slide things and do all these things you wanted to do as a kid. And nobody's there to stop you to do it. It's not Disney World where you look at all these cool things and you're like, oh, I wish they would let me go climb on that. You can do all that. Nobody's there to stop you. So it's great for all those reasons. And then you meet cool people, you build strong relationships. One of the things, and we talked about it when I was talking to you earlier as well, one of the things I have found is you build relationships that are stronger, faster, canyoneering and other outdoor stuff. And I think part of it is just because you have to rely on each other. And you learn quickly who you can rely on and who you can't, and who will take care of you and who, will carry their weight and more. Yeah. And like the conversations you have tend to be more interesting, and there's none of this, how's the weather? What do you do for a living? None of that like bullshit conversation you have day to day. You like talk to people about real things and build real friendships. And that's another great thing that comes from it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's amazing what happens in the canyon in a day. So let's say your podcast again and where people can find you.
Right. So it's Go Get Outside, and Go is an acronym. So it's G.O. But also if you just put in Go Get Outside, you'll find it. You can go to gogetoutside.com and you can find everything there, or you can go to, as far as I know, every podcast platform and find it. And you can also go to YouTube and Go Get Outside podcast there, as well as I think on Instagram, though I don't care about Instagram as much. Go to the YouTube page, subscribe to the YouTube page, and go to wherever you go to your podcast purveyor of choice. Subscribe, rate, review, and share the show with someone you think would enjoy it.
That was very well said.
I've only said that 120 times.
Right? There's times I'm like, I need to just do one basic intro and one basic
and then just
outro.
keep using it and reuse it.
Yeah.
No, instead I just say it again every time.
Yeah.
Every 2 weeks.
Every time. All right. Well, is there any safety advice you'd like to leave our listeners with before we say goodbye?
Yeah. Check your ego. And by check your ego, I don't mean don't be egotistical, although I also mean that. But don't let your own sense of what you're capable of or what you know get in the way of you making good decisions. So don't ever because I've made the mistake of being complacent before and got very lucky that it did not end up dead or terribly injured. And so don't make that mistake that I've made. Don't get complacent. Always check your systems. Always double check everything. And don't ever think you're smarter than nature.
Well said. I like that a lot. All right. Well, with that, the canyons are calling. We should probably go.
All right. Let's get.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Jason. If you want to go to his podcast and listen to his interview with me, you can go to gogetoutside.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Just Go Get Outside and listen to his interview with me. He also interviewed Tom a few years ago and a lot of other different canyoneers. So check out his podcast if you want more podcasts in your life. And speaking of podcasts, I do have several podcasts that I just need to edit. I am planning on getting back to monthly releases and the monthly canyon calls and back to show as normal. I do apologize for taking a break. Some podcasts do like seasonal breaks. I have never done that. So I just had to take a few months to heal, focus on my life and my herb school and that type of stuff. So thank you for your support. If you have an idea for the show, please reach out to me at thecanyonsarecalling@gmail.com. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. The Canyons Are Calling. I post on Facebook more often than Instagram, but I do post not only the podcast content, I post more canyoneering related things that go on in the community that I noticed. So that's a good place to follow me if you want more information about the canyoneering community in general. Anyway, the canyons are calling. I gotta go.